It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that said, religion, not controversial enough. Let's throw in some sex as well. I'll be your host today, Christy Powell, and joining me, of course, is Bianca.
Hello, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving.
And in what is becoming, I suppose, a holiday tradition, the wonderful and talented Serafina Smith.
I am a holiday tradition.
Just in and of yourself. It's nice. It's nice.
We're all here to give thanks for me.
I'm down with that.
So, whether you are on your way to see family, whether you're cleaning up after the holidays, whether you are stuck at work or even just stuck at the gym, we're so glad that you took the time to join us today.
How does one get stuck at the gym?
Oh, it's happened to me.
Yeah, it's that thing where you're supposed to go to the gym, and then you do go to the gym, and you're not allowed to leave the gym because you told people you would go to the gym, and you did. But now you're just at the gym.
The exercise is actually going to the gym, not what you do at the gym.
That's probably better, but less amusing than my image in my head, which was like being trapped inside like a Bowflex or something.
Yeah, just like pinned down.
What have I done?
That's why you always use a squatter. Okay.
Practice safe Bowflex.
Right. Well, no matter where you are or why you've come here, we're excited to be offering what insight, what community we can as you are struggling with family and the culture and everything else during this highly charged season.
Yeah.
You know, this is a time of year, particularly for atheists, as we kind of like look around at the store shop windows changing. And, you know, it's fine and great and wonderful to have conversations about representation and about, you know, what it feels like to see, you know, holiday cups and all of this kind of craziness in storefronts. But more to the point, it can be a really difficult time, particularly for queer folks, to be around families, to be dealing with people that they don't maybe see every day, and everybody's trying to get along. So we hope we're able to offer some insight. We have a number of your questions, emails, and voicemails that we'd like to get through, and we'd like to say, keep them coming, especially this time of year. Oh, yeah. Please feel free to shoot us an email, call that Ask line, that 512-6660-ASK. We'll be continuing to take your messages and answer your questions throughout the holidays, throughout the year. Mm-hmm. And with that, I suppose let's jump into that first email.
All right.
Okay. My question pertains to cross-dressing. This is something I was doing when I was a kid and kept doing until my Christian mother told me in no uncertain terms to stop. A few decades passed, and a few years ago, while visiting an adult shop for the first time, I mentioned I wanted to dress up in women's clothing. I received encouragement to do so, and I not only brought clothing from a women's clothing store and a Walmart, I also connected with the local transgender support group and also saw a trans-friendly counselor several times. I never connected with the leaders of the group and, in fact, felt rejected by them, but that itch never went away. Then a major event came that I won't go into here, and that itch faded to the background for a while, but now that that event is behind me, I find the itch is still there and, like my sexual orientation, never went away. I live in a red state and actually went back into the store to buy some undergarments. I want to go back, but I really want to find or develop a safe space where I can explore this side of myself without A, getting killed, B, my family and coworkers finding out, C, getting laughed at by sales associates, especially as we're in an age where it's more acceptable to be an asshole and fundamentalism seems to come back with a vengeance. I don't know where to turn, as I'm afraid to even reach out to the local atheist community. Again, lest I get outed somehow to family and coworkers, and am reluctant to reach out to the local trans community. Its Facebook page isn't even private anymore, so any one of my Facebook friends would know that I joined the group. What do you recommend as some good steps for me?
Oof. There's a lot there.
Yeah, we really are diving right into the crux of trying to just be and exist and live a fulfilled life as a person in a really oppressive society in many ways.
Yeah. Is there any way you can get out of the red state? Or at least find a blue city like Austin?
So that's plan A.
That's
Plan A,
That's the ideal, but I realize that's not probably feasible all the time. First of all, good for you going back, exploring more, and being brave enough to make those first steps and to talk to a counselor and to get involved with people. And I'm sorry you didn't feel like they accepted you fully. I understand that. Certain spaces, even within the community, can be exclusionary to people who don't fall into certain all or nothing categories. So if you are simply identifying as somebody who likes to cross-dress as opposed to maybe a trans person, that could give you a little bit of pushback from people who think that, well, you have to identify as trans in order to be accepted as part of this group. Mm-hmm. So I feel you there, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it is kind of a ticky-tacky subject. We talked about it a lot last Thursday, if you haven't caught that episode, just how there's so many places within the queer community that you're getting pushed from both sides because you're not queer enough, but then you're also too queer. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think everybody in that space, especially early on, struggles with to some extent. And it can be really hard to say, like, is my identity valid? You know, you might watch some inspirational movie, you know, the Danish Girl or something along those lines, where you see these like heroic stories of people overcoming incredible odds in order to be their true selves. And those are beautiful stories and ones we should be telling. But then when we find our own desires or wants or itches being not easily repressed, but possible to be ignored, then it makes us start to wonder, well, am I even really trans? Am I even really this thing or that other thing? Because I read this inspirational story about somebody who just couldn't not be themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
And so because our desires or our fantasies or our identity aren't overwhelming, they're somehow not real. Mm-hmm. It's a thought process and a mental trap I feel like way too many of us fall into.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I want to address the practical considerations that you're asking about, though. You know, you want to be able to go shopping without getting harassed or beaten up and stuff like that. Get that. Absolutely get that. Options for you, of course, are shopping online. There are stores specifically tailored for cross-dressers and for trans folk. But also you can just do, you know, Amazon.com. You can do Target.com, that sort of thing. You know, if any of those folks want to sponsor the show, feel free. Shout out. But, those are, you know, there's ways to do it, and a lot of them you can send it back for free if it doesn't fit right, etc. It doesn't give you the experience of going to a store and, you know, looking at all the pretty things and trying one out, though. So I can see where it's not necessarily ideal in some ways. So other thoughts, find someone that you trust and go with them, so that you can arrange beforehand that they have your back. You know, you walk in, they'll go with you. If it's a woman, then you can go together and it will help divert, people's confusion. Mm-hmm. But even if not, just having someone there who will be there in case someone decides to get uppity, and be able to say, hey, no, that's, you know, that person is supposed to be there and it's cool. So get out. That can make all the difference. Other options are just going somewhere else to shop. Yeah, you mentioned living in a place where you are not comfortable, where the atmosphere, the culture is not welcoming. You know, for fun, take some time and like take a road trip somewhere where it's, you know, bluer, and you might be much more welcome. Somewhere where there are specialty shops that cater to you, or somewhere where it's just like, you know, a hippy dippy place that they'll see that anyway. And those are all great ways of getting around the issue that you're sightseeing if you're not going to take plan A, which I think is a great idea. By the way.
Also, just as a general note, if you're afraid of literally your first concern was getting killed, if you are actually concerned about that, then your survival does take precedence.
Yeah, valid.
Yeah, and if you are not in a safe place where you can express yourself fully, nobody is pressuring you to be yourself at the expense of your own safety. So you don't have to worry about being valid or being enough of whatever it is that you are without, no one's going to judge you or say that you're lesser for taking care of yourself first and making sure that you're protected.
Yeah,
I think that's certainly true, and we always want to push safety first and that kind of mindset. But I also want to acknowledge that fear is listed, and even if it is not in a necessarily super rational, this is a highly likely, physical danger type of circumstance, just acknowledging that that's sort of an existential threat that hangs over everybody in the queer community, but especially somebody who is a trans woman. And that is something that has to be kind of handled a little bit differently than just the logistical safeties, because it is something that's going to be kind of just a stressor that can be confronted and maybe pushed past. But that's tricky too, because of course you do want to make sure that safety is the most important thing and that you're not putting yourself too far out there.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world yet where people can always express themselves free of that fear.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to offer that I think is so obvious that it may even come across as dismissive, and I certainly don't mean for it to be, but you talk about these Facebook groups and how they're not private and how that's not necessarily secure. And I'm sure that this has certainly occurred to you, but I want to just let you know that there are so many people who have multiple Facebook accounts for this very reason.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I've mentioned this on the show before, I think I probably would have gotten bored or jumped off the Facebook train a few years ago, but what kept me coming back was the groups and the ability to have like these online communities of queer folks and these other things. And in those spaces, maybe half the accounts there are just for being in those groups. Mm-hmm. They are people who aren't using their real names or aren't using a real picture. And there's nothing shameful or cowardly or anything else about that. If you choose to navigate those spaces and to feel connected to a sense of community behind a safety mask, that's perfectly valid and reasonable.
Yeah, it is an important safety measure, and there's absolutely no shame in that at all. I'm sorry to hear about your experience with the local trans community. I'm not surprised, but I am sorry. People who have a need, like an emotional need to cross-dress, share a lot of the same struggles as trans folk do. And so I feel like we need to have a little more commonality. I'm sorry. It sucks, but it's real, and I see it from both sides because there are a lot of shared struggles, and there are also a lot of differences, and there has been a lot of conflation in the public eye between the two that a lot of people want to stay away from, to separate, and so I get probably why you encountered that, and I'm sorry to hear that it happened. I would suggest, again, plan A, but just finding other groups that are farther away that you can connect electronically, see if there's any sort of nearby cross-dressing group, maybe just like the trans group in the next town. I don't know where you live, so I can't make more specific suggestions, but yeah, if you are stuck where you are and that is not a conducive place to being yourself, then it's always going to come down to either get somewhere else or, seek out ways around what you're having to go through.
Outside of Facebook, outside of Meetup, outside of these sorts of things, are there any particular national organizations or anywhere in particular that you might point somebody to find a new trans group or a new cross-dressing support group or anything along those lines?
Oh my gosh, I'm so out of touch.
Oh my goodness.
I haven't done this in so long. I don't know.
I would
ask someone younger. Kids these days with their Facebooks and their MySpace.
Yeah, I know the Trevor
their fax
Project
machines
is huge, but I think that focuses more on trans homelessness and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they are primarily a hotline that does not have like regional networks. They operate more on a national level. So it's not a bad place to start. But honestly, things like your local NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness, not to conflate cross-dressing or being transgender with a mental illness, but I do want to bring that organization up because they are a great local resource for all kinds of community supports, which we are talking about sort of the mental anguish, if I can, of societal oppression. And they will be able to, if not offer directly a particular group themselves, they can likely point you in the right direction. So that would be one place I would consider.
I don't think I know a single gender nonconforming person who hasn't had to struggle with enough stuff,
mental illness concerns,
that
because
their trauma
that
has made them need that sort of thing.
No question.
Yeah.
Also, if you are looking at atheist communities as well, there are online atheist hotlines, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the Recovering from Religion Foundation. These places have hotlines that you can call, and they will probably also have a lot of more local resources for you to check out.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into that first voicemail, any other thoughts on this one? Any last ideas to recommend?
Thank you for sharing, and we're rooting for you.
Yeah, I mean, and as you try out different things, let us know how it's going and what you encounter. Maybe we'll be able to come up with more specific help for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, if we can play that first voice message.
I think I have slowly recovered from these very unhealthy beliefs since I lost my faith about 8 years ago. But I was wondering, what are some of the things you have noticed that stick with someone the longest after leaving a fundamentalist church?
Fear of hell.
Yeah.
I've heard that wasn't my experience, thankfully. From what I've seen, and kind of wrapping this back into the secular sexuality angle, is kind of that fear of sex on some level.
Yeah.
Whether that's fear of, getting an STD or getting pregnant or just having an emotional connection with somebody that is then broken and then you're both ruined forever. Like, there is always going to be some kind of baggage related to sex.
Makes sense, because there's a lot of cultural stuff backing that up.
Right. It depends on how your particular community discouraged you against it when you were a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only fear of sex, I think, but often sort of an unrealized moralism. It's one thing when you have like a specific book or a specific set of rules that tells you how people should be, and then you get away from that and you say, okay, that was ridiculous, my bad, and you try to move on with life. And there are still so many things that you haven't necessarily challenged, that assumptions that you sort of held on to when they were connected to those beliefs. And now that you've walked away from those beliefs, just because you haven't had this particular encounter, this particular experience. And so you find that your initial reaction to any sort of new moral quandary is based on that old data, based on that old foundation. And so I find that particularly working in gender and sexuality, as people are encountering like new orientations, new fetishes, new kinks, new interests that they had never encountered before, their initial reaction over and over and over again is more in line with what it was back when they had very narrow, heteronormative, Jesus-approved views of sex and sexuality.
Yeah, and largely you don't even notice it, right? Because it was just part of what you grew up in, and it's part of like what you took in as what is right and wrong before you even had like it says so in the Bible to connect it to, because you just grew up with it. It was the water you swam in the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Often when we, leave religion, we imagine ourselves mentally like picking up the Bible and throwing it out.
Right.
But in reality, our belief system, our faith, or however you want to frame it, was so much more than that book.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you had looked at that book in the first place, you probably wouldn't have had that faith system.
Fair.
So you have to realize you're not just like switching out, one book for another book. You are switching out a culture for another culture. And that has all of these tendrils and all of these connections and anchors and roots.
Oh my gosh.
For sure.
Yeah, there's so much. And you see it a lot too, in secular people and having their first reaction to something, to be to, I don't know, to abortion or to, anything LGBT or
particularly LGBT with regards to kids.
Oh gosh,
Because
yeah.
it's one thing to challenge for yourself. Yeah, I don't see why Adam and Steve can't be a wonderful couple. They're consenting adults.
Right.
And then you have the thought, well, what about their son, Tommy?
What about the children?
And if you follow the rationale down, it very quickly dispels itself. But if you've only done that first step, the Adam and Steve step, the Tommy step might be the next one that you're getting to. And that might be a somewhat, dated reference, I suppose, but you can take those same notions and apply them to conversations going on right now about acknowledging the gender identities of young children in a number of different things.
Now I want to see you write like a small booklet or article or something and just call it the Tommy Step.
See, I'm
Tommy
thinking
step?
about it as like a dance, like do the Tommy step.
Right, yeah.
Don't know what that would be. It's what we
It's
do
just
at
like
the beginning
Chris
of the
Farley
show
doing the
every
electric
time.
slide.
Yeah, the Tommy
gosh.
Step.
No, I think you're both right on. I think it's the unconscious assigning of moral value to things, regardless of whether that's sexual actions or gender identity or anything that is just natural and inherent in us as people. Making that into a moral question when maybe it just doesn't need to be one.
Right.
But also, in contrast to that, the music. That's the worst part. That's the thing that takes the longest to get away
true.
from.
It is very
That's
true.
the thing. Like your sophisticated understanding of moral objective truth. Yes, that's important, but the way worse thing is the music.
You are right.
Man, I was so lucky with that.
is an awesome God.
That is
and now it's in your head today.
I am so mad at you right now.
Right? Exactly. So I think
God
the answer to
damn
your
it,
question,
Christy.
it's the music that's so hard to get away from.
Yeah, I lucked out. Because my parents were not Bible believing. Well, I mean, they were religious, but religious, and so they tried to take us to church 3 or 4 times.
Oh my God.
Ever. And when I went, it was just sitting boring, and it was the kind of church that did not have a choir
No
and singing
catchy
and
music.
stuff. So there was so I completely avoided that.
Nice.
Just
You are blessed with
sinister
many
earworms.
far fewer earworms than the rest.
Yeah,
of us.
all my earworms are cereal
80s
jingles and
anime.
stuff
Oh,
from the
there you
80s.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
No, actually, that is actually a really good point because I was
80s anime is a really good point.
It always is.
I mean, I'm good with that.
no the whole music thing because I had recorded myself playing some piano a couple weeks ago, and I got so many messages from people okay, so tell me, how do you find music to play when you learned an instrument as a kid and all you know are worship songs? I stopped playing my instrument because that's all I knew, and I don't want to go back to that. So yeah, it's a thing.
Well, what if you filk it? Just take that music and then write your own parody verses.
I mean,
and
most
just,
of
go
those
for
songs
it.
are probably in the public domain at this point. You can write your own stuff to it.
Filk it.
Send it in, and we'll play it.
We will. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, moving on to the next email.
All right. Our next email begins. I'm a female to male transgender person. I identify as a gay man. I am primarily attracted, small font, to cis gay men. I have an ad up on a gay dating website. I haven't had top surgery, and I don't want to have bottom surgery. I'm finding that I do get a lot of replies to my ad. However, I feel like I'm often fetishized. I'm seen as the best of both worlds for some men. When I tell them I prefer anal sex, I always get asked about vaginal. It makes me dysphoric to have vaginal. Cis men don't understand how I feel about vaginal. How do I try to get men to understand I don't want vaginal sex? I also seem to find men who, after 20 minutes of messaging, are telling me they love me. I don't understand that. Is this part of gay male culture, or are these men that desperate? I don't think anyone can possibly fall in love that quickly. Relationships take time. Finally, I don't understand why gay men send nude photos to one another right off the bat. I don't mind seeing them, but not right away. Are all these things I've mentioned part of the gay culture? Being a gay FTM, I'm not familiar with gay culture. I think that's part of men's culture.
Yeah, a lot of that is familiar to me as well.
I mean, honestly, if we could cancel the show, we could stop bothering with all of this each and every week. If we could find a simple answer to the question, how do I try to get men to understand I don't want vaginal sex? Because that is a question that applies to, at some point, every person with a vagina.
Yeah.
Plenty of people without.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that recognizing and just validating right off the incredible fetishization that comes with this gender identity is important because, you're beautiful and people want you, and that's great, and that's a wonderful thing to be a part of. But so often it does lead into this space of objectification where it's not just like, oh, I'm beautiful and people want me. It's, oh, I'm this beautiful thing that people happen to want.
Right. It's I'm beautiful and people want me versus people want me because I'm beautiful.
Sure.
And there's this fine line, too, because, I generally want the traits that I have to be found attractive to people, right? But at what point is it just like I am only attractive because I have a specific trait, And that's just, and it's a hard line to walk. And it's hard because, not just because it's hard to tell for me whether I'm being fetishized, but it's hard for the people themselves to tell. They may not know. They just get this feeling, and maybe they haven't noticed that half the people they've hit on the last month have been trans or whatever. They're just thinking of themselves as really inclusive.
And it's worth pointing out that nobody is just one or the other. Well-meaning people that are well worth your time, that are worth dating and are wonderful, can still have some of those sort of objectifying thought processes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. As far as what gay culture is and isn't, there is a joke, at least in bi culture, that you can make anything bi culture. Like you can just decide, like, sitting weird is bi culture. Just
label it as bi.
It's like
That's true.
It is though. It is true. Or like finger guns is bi culture.
I don't know why, but that does feel bi to me.
See, it's pretty cool. But I feel like, I guess my question is, what is the end goal to this question? If we were to say yes, this is all gay culture, would that then make it okay? No. Like, men telling you they love you after 20 minutes is not okay, regardless of whether or not it's the culture. If you're just asking, can I expect to see more of this as I am continuing to date?
Yes.
Unfortunately. That is kind of part and parcel, regardless of orientation or gender identity. That's just kind of how things go.
Well, I think it's a yes and, because I think we can acknowledge that these are all pitfalls that are just natural to dating.
True.
That these are the types of things that are going to happen regardless of if you met somebody at a church potluck or at a bar or wherever.
Well, they may not send you nudes right away if you're at a church potluck.
I mean, it depends on which churches you were going to.
I mean, tell me which churches you're going
which
to.
Which churches should I be going to, right?
Going out behind the church.
That's true. And beyond that, even if these are at least pitfalls that are familiar in any kind of dating, I do think that they're going to be amplified in online dating, which is not, for me, a reason to hate online dating. But I also get that too. And we talked about that over Halloween in particular. If you want to check out that episode, I do still think that there's a lot of beauty and a lot of pros to online dating, but this is a huge pitfall of that. And then I think it gets amplified again because I do think we can acknowledge that these are both A, heavily male traits, B, heavily gay male traits, and maybe even see heavily traits of people who particularly fetishize trans men. So I think it's worth saying that, like, yes, these are all common human experiences, but you're probably getting it to a much higher degree in the spaces that you're operating in. Does that feel
fair.
true?
That is
That's
true.
Okay.
And I wish I could tell you that it's going to get better.
Well, I guess you'll.
I mean,
I'm
I
sure
think
you'll
it will in the
find
next
a way
5-10
to-
years, but
Also, as you're getting more comfortable in that space and know how to interact with people and when to say no and when to, like, yeah, if you're going to be able to pick up on those people who say I love you after 20 minutes a lot sooner.
True.
After a while, you're going to be able to say I don't want to see your dick for like a week, maybe. You're going to be able to navigate the space more easily as well. So that's also a thing.
yeah, I think that's very true. I want to be very careful about not coming across as suggesting that this is your fault or that you
right,
solicited
right.
these unsolicited dick pics or anything along those lines.
No.
But by that same token, by the time I was a senior in college, I was able to like walk through the quad without 27,000 people handing me flyers in a way that I wasn't able to my freshman year.
Right,
Because you just develop that resting don't fuck with me phase. And you operate and just move and communicate and express yourself in a different way. And even in online dating, the way that you write your profile, the way that you respond to people is going to communicate to them early on sort of where they can push you and what might be acceptable to you. And it's not your fault to not know how to do that.
Exactly.
But I do think there's a learning curve, and that with a little bit of practice and patience, maybe some good reading, there are plenty of great books on this subject. I particularly recommend Dataclysm by Christian Rudder. But in any case, I do think that with time and effort that this will get a little bit easier.
Speaking of pushing, I'm going to give a personal recommendation. Do not, so if you state clearly a boundary that you do not want vaginal sex, you only want to do anal sex and other stuff, and a person pushes that more than once,
Yeah.
cut.
Yeah.
Gone. That person is not going to respect your boundaries in the future, and you don't want that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. There are some nuances of communication and trying and forgiveness and understanding, but there are also hard lines and boundaries, and that is one where you can be very explicit and then hold that line very tightly. Yeah. Okay, well, while we get the next voicemail queued up, any final thoughts on that one?
Just keep going at it, I guess. It'll be more comfortable.
you're awesome, and you're worth getting, partners that respect that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what the culture is.
All right. Well, with that, let's play that next tape.
Hello. My question is, I am an atheist who's been an atheist for quite a long time, since my mid-20s. I'm 40 right now, and I just got out of a 5+ year relationship with a girl, and she was also an atheist. And my relationships before that, for the most part, were with other atheists, because I find that I can't really have a relationship with someone who's not an atheist. I don't know why. But anyways, now that I'm older and I live in a fairly small town where, there's not as many people that are open about atheism or even agnosticism, I'm finding it hard to find, people that I could date, because I don't want to bother dating people who are not agnostics or atheists because of, compatibility issues. So for someone that lives in kind of a small town, under 100,000 people, and you go on dating sites and, there's like 3 or 4 matches tops that are agnostics or atheists. Like, what do you suggest that I do? What would you do in my situation, especially someone that's, 40 years old, and as you know, it gets a little harder to date as you age. Anyways, I appreciate any advice you guys have. Thank you. Bye.
So plan A.
Yeah, I was gonna say, have you heard of Plan A?
I was thinking that too. No, I was definitely thinking that too. That getting out of that small town is important. And man, I hear how that sounds. Like, I hear how dismissive and unhelpful of a piece of advice that comes across as, but I also can't help but stress how valuable it is. If you're in a situation where you don't feel like you can move, like, we get it. We hear you. That makes sense. Also, are you sure though? Like, are you sure you can't move? Because that may be an important step towards living the life you want to live.
Like, so many of the calls to this show, just like since the beginning,
just stop being in the South,
are all about, I'm like this, and the place where I'm living does not allow this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know it sucks. You should be somewhere that respects you. And
there's a reason we're all in Austin.
Yeah.
I feel that. Another thing, and I'm going to have my ACA membership revoked for this, I guess, but are you sure you can't date people who are theists in some capacity? Yeah, thank you. I knew that was going to happen. No, because
that's super valid.
Yeah, there are people out there who aren't going to, if they're trying to convert you, sure, no, hard stop. Yeah. Or if their whole life and identity.
Now I feel like that's a whole kink that I didn't realize I had.
Ooh.
I really want to be hit on by some church girls now.
Can I invite you to coffee?
Yeah. Oh, God.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Got very sexually charged in here all of a sudden.
Oh, can I invite you to coffee?
No, so if their whole identity and social circle is wrapped up in church and church group and all of that, then maybe not, because you're never going to be able to be part of that. But if there's somebody who just happens to also be a Christian culturally, I'm sure you've tried before. I'm not suggesting this is a new thing necessarily, but that's also an option. Again, I don't know where you live, so there might be very few people who aren't very aggressively conservative Christian.
Well, I think you made an important point about being Christian culturally.
Right.
Because particularly if you are on a dating app and you narrow your search results to only include atheists, for instance,
right,
there are so many people that we, from the outside looking in, might label as atheists that don't, in this culture, in this moment, take on that label.
Right.
So here we stand as like the Atheist Community of Austin, and we're very
well, you guys do. I'm
revoked now. Right, yeah. No, when I said we, it was very much
obviously
Serafina and myself.
Okay,
you.
Good to know.
Right. And yet, there are so many people that belong here, that would be welcome here, that would find their points of view, their understanding of reality very comfortable here. But for plenty of reasons, some of them good, some of them not so much, or not as examined. For lots of reasons, people just don't. They don't want to take on that label. Yeah. They don't want to take on that baggage. And I think that you can still date somebody like that.
Right. If you're going about this through online dating and you're setting filters for yourself, I'd suggest taking those off and just talking to some people. You probably would be able to tell fairly quickly at least which ones are very Christian. They'll probably have a couple Bible verses in their profile or, just pictures of sunsets. But yeah, I think opening up your options a little bit maybe and seeing where that takes you.
Most of the people in my life that I've dated have been religious.
Oh yeah, some of my really good friends now, we'll hang out, we'll have great conversations. They're all Christian and fairly aggressively so, but we are able to connect as well.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to make assumptions and I don't want to try and psychoanalyze you, but I am curious just listening to your voicemail if it's less of a problem of wanting to meet somebody who is like you in terms of their belief system, in terms of their labels, in terms of their values, and more sort of a personality thing. I feel like atheists and skeptics often confuse being concerned with like objective truth and very literal and, more what we used to call neurotic type thinking. I hate using that term because it has so much cultural baggage, but from a certain maybe older point of view, everybody exists on this spectrum between neuroticism and psychosis. And I recognize that those are difficult words to hear, but what we're really just trying to say is that some people are very heavily grounded in reality. They are numbers-only folks. They are your accountants. They are very wanting everything to be strongly connected. And other folks are a little bit looser than that. And it might not be that they believe in imaginary sky people. It might just be that they use very fluid and colorful language and have a very rich thought life and that kind of thing. And I don't mean to make your call about that, but I do feel like we often conflate those two distinctions and can maybe miss the boat on who somebody is because we put them in one camp or the other when we're actually looking at the totally wrong spectrum to be considering.
Right, and you can't say neuroticism without eroticism.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's why I got into psychology. Why I do the work that I do.
Figured that was what it was.
Last thought for that, though. If you do end up, regardless of who it is, especially if you start dating people who are not atheist, make sure you're on the same page about birth control and what happens. Yeah. Because you want to make sure that you're all on the same page about that kind of thing.
Early on.
That would be a big thing, I think, that would be a differentiating factor that you probably want to nail down pretty quick.
General reproductive health thing.
Yeah.
Really important to agree if you're fucking,
So I hate to say it, but it almost feels like in some ways our entire advice is either move or lower your standards because it is kind of like change.
Lower.
Change. A change. Okay, so just maybe soften on some of those like rigid filters and get to a place of like seeing the person as a person.
Well, not even personally. I think just in terms of if you're online dating, because your email referenced, I've only had 5 or 6 matches. If in your dating profile you have those filters set up, take a couple of them off, see what happens.
Sure.
Also, long-distance relationships. Those are a thing.
They are a thing.
And when we say reduce your filters, I think one of the filters to look at is, if a relationship really is important to you, then maybe 50 miles isn't a unreasonable distance to drive. And I know it can feel like it, but
or you can
once
drive
you fall
100
in love,
miles
and if
once
falling in love is what you're looking for.
and move somewhere where you can find more people.
Yeah,
There's that, yeah. And I mean, it's just getting down to brass tacks. That's what it falls down to, though. Your problem is you're in a place that doesn't suit you. You have to either adjust what suits you or go to a different place. I hate to be super reductionist about your issue, and I don't want to, in any way belittle you or say that what your problem is a simple one that you could be solving. It's just, that's just kind of what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. I wish I had like a magic wand to like, here's some new hot atheists in your area who want to bang. Although you can probably find an app about that. But
I was going to say, you can make a lot of money.
Hot, horny atheists in your
area
that want to meet you.
You, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I can't. Sorry.
Fair point.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along.
All right, we want to read our last email for today.
Let's hear it.
All right, this email says, I am a mid-20s male, and for my whole life I have called myself heterosexual, but now I'm thinking that I might be bi. The problem I'm having is that my attraction to men is so different and very limited compared to my attraction to women. Mm-hmm. I don't feel interested in having a dating or romantic relationship with men, but the idea of giving or receiving a blowjob seems very exciting to me, and maybe some kissing. I'm not interested in anal sex either, which from what I understand is an activity that seems to be expected from most homosexual relationships. Also, I have found myself attracted to very few men. Mm-hmm. It's like my bar for men that I find attractive is heaps higher than for women. As a result, I can completely pass as hetero, and I guess I convinced myself for my whole life that I was up until now. Considering all of these things, would it make sense for me to call myself bi? I feel like me taking that name would be seen as inauthentic or me wanting to claim an oppressed status that I haven't earned. There's also the issue of coming out. I'm married to a Christian. We married as Christians, and I've since deconverted. And I expect to be married to her until one of us dies. I know she would have an extremely negative reaction to me telling her this, and it wouldn't change my dating or sex life at all either. So I feel like maybe it's just better to forget about this part of me.
For the most part of that email, I was just thinking the whole time, welcome to the life of every bisexual ever.
Hi.
I thought to myself 5 years ago, I could have absolutely written this email.
Yeah. Same.
I mean,
exactly the
I
same
was
thing.
in a monogamous relationship, married to the wife that I had met as a Christian, had deconverted, and had a great interest in sucking dick. So, like, I get it.
I think I have a couple thoughts about this. First, does it make sense to call yourself bi even though you haven't quote unquote earned it? If that's what you want to call yourself, yes. Yes. That's exactly the question I asked when I first realized, oh my God, I'm bi. I contacted a friend and I was like, help, I've been an ally for a long time. Now I think I'm in the community, but I don't know if I've earned the right to be here because I haven't felt oppressed myself. And what he said was, hello and welcome. You are here. This is who you are. We love you. You're in now. You're good. So I just want to extend that to you as well. You're good. Hi. So yes, if that's what you want to call yourself, if that feels what's authentic to you, then yes, 100% you get to call yourself that.
Not only that, I mean, not only do you get to pick your labels and is it valid if you identify with something to take it on, but I think we can acknowledge that this is a very common experience of being bi.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
That very few, if anybody, is right there in the middle of being attracted to male types and female types.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the second thing I was going to bring up. You don't have to, it's not like a 50-50 thing, even just for many reasons, including the fact that it's not just two things.
Right.
Being bi is being attracted to more than one gender. So that can be your own gender and other genders. That could be two genders that are not your own. So if you're interested in, say, cis women and non-binary people, that's also, you're bi in that sense. So yeah, you don't have to have that split down the middle. Yes, I feel exactly the same way. You can also you might be bisexual but hetero-romantic. If that's something that, if you don't see yourself dating or being romantic with somebody of the same gender, then you might not be bi-romantic, and not everybody is. You don't need to do that to be bi.
If I had a nickel for every time I've seen a bisexual person sharing a meme that was something like being bisexual means I'm attracted to every woman in the world and like 3 specific men, I would be very rich right now.
Yep.
Or just how about the cultural concept of the phrase, but now I'm thinking I might be bi?
Right.
Like, if you could just take that and make this into a reaction gif, like you could use it
Might
on
be
every
bi?
might be bi. So I think that's very true. And yeah, I totally relate. I used to say that I had a very we'll say expansive appetite when it came towards femme types, that, if there were 100 women up on stage all vying for my attention, that probably 95 of them, I'd be like, I'm attracted to you and to you and to you. Sorry, this one. Yeah, no. But that if you reverse that process with 100 conventionally attractive men, that I would personally be much, 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 much pickier. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, I also want to hear the reality of maybe not being particularly interested in men, or maybe whether that's sexual or romantic, not being interested in anal specifically, but in particular being drawn towards dicks. Mm-hmm. There's a word for that because it is such a common experience. So I don't know if you do choose to identify as a cockhound, if that's the word that you want to think of yourself as, but there's a reason we have a word for it, which is to say,
are you okay?
Somebody, particularly a man, who is not necessarily attracted to men, but is specifically attracted to penises, which is a wonderful thing to be attracted to.
Yeah. For sure. Also, just to let you know,
Really?
there are many.
I'm taking off my
You okay?
mic. I'm walking away. I can't with that word. I can't. I'm sorry. I don't mean to shame.
I'm
not trying to kink shame. Kink is not my kink.
It is an
It's okay.
aggressive word.
It's good. It's good. So you don't have to call yourself bi,
Just
but you
makes me
definitely
giggle.
are now a cockhouse. I'm sorry. I appreciate Also, just, throwing this out there, there are many gay couples who don't do anal sex. That's not a requirement
Absolutely.
to being bi or gay. You don't need to like that. And then just for this last part, which is, I guess, like the practical element of it, should you come out to your wife? Should you forget, quote unquote, about this part of who you are? I can't say one way or the other in terms of coming out. I think the culture has had this very weird way of like discussing coming out. Like you have to like jump out of a closet and like be like flying rainbow flags.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to do that. That's not the necessarily like the thing you need to do in order to come out. So
if you want to, that's awesome.
you can. You totally can. I wish I had. But no, it could also just be something that you're honest about if it comes up, which it probably won't, but it might. And you just be honest about it in that moment. Definitely don't forget about who you are, though. That's not the only two options. You don't have to be out to everybody or forget about who you are. I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, it's possible that this is a phase because people go through phases in their life. It's entirely likely that this is an attraction and a feeling that will follow you throughout your life. So if you are considering, hiding it, understand that what you're considering is hiding it forever. And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So, it's absolutely your choice and there's not a wrong choice in that. But I want you to think very carefully about what you are deciding because it's a big deal.
Sure. And then acknowledging that coming out as bi or whatever that might look like, you say that it won't change your dating or your sex life at all. And I will take your word for it. And I think I understand what you're getting at, which is that I'm in a monogamous relationship. I'm not looking to change that.
Right.
My wife doesn't have a penis, so my penis access is 0. So what would it do to tell people I like penises? I follow that logic. I respect it. I hear where you're coming from. But I might also just push back on that idea of it's not changing your sex life at all, because perhaps it could if you were to open up to these things to yourself or to your partner, whether that includes things like pornography, whether that includes things like a potential encounter with somebody outside of the relationship, whether that includes just fantasy play with yourself or with your wife, or all of these different things. I'm not meaning to suggest what you want or how to get it, but I would maybe push back on that idea that things won't change one iota, because I kind of imagine that type of disclosure is going to affect things, even if you're only disclosing and openly and honestly communicating to yourself, because you're now open to a whole world of erotica, of pornography, of fantasy, of all of these different things, which may or may not be something you're looking for, but I think that are still rich and valid and affirming.
Plus,
Also,
you could get a strap-on.
Yeah, just buy your
there
wife a
are
strap-on
different ways to-
as
yeah.
a precursor to this conversation. No, so maybe don't do that. I think that I would push back a little bit on what you said, just to present the other side of things. If you don't want things to change, if you just want to let your wife know what's going on, I would suggest there's this thing that we say in the atheist community. I've heard people in this community talk about it a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I used to belong to this community, guys. And what I heard them say was that, when you say to somebody that you love who's a Christian, I'm an atheist, what they hear is, I don't want a relationship with you anymore. I don't love you anymore. I want things to change between us. That's not what that means. And I think a lot of the time it can also feel that way if you tell somebody who you're in a relationship with that you're bi or you're genderqueer or whatever it is that you are. That could also be interpreted as, I want to change things. You're not enough for me. I need something more in my life. So if that's not the case, and if it is, that's a whole other conversation that you will need to be having. But if you're honestly just like, I'm married to you, I don't want anyone else, I just want you to be aware of this, make sure that that's expressed, because otherwise there are going to be assumptions made probably.
Yeah, sharing your identity doesn't obligate anybody else to a specific behavior.
Right.
And that's what we want to make clear, while also encouraging you to, take that validating step of sharing your identity if you feel you can.
Yeah. I'm going to be sort of a one-note person here.
Move.
No. not that, no. No. I'm coming from a place where I have been in a long-term relationship where I was afraid to reveal something intrinsic to myself because I felt that it would destroy the relationship, because I felt that I would not be accepted by the person that I was with. And that is a terrible place to live. It is a terrible place to spend a lot of time in. It is a place that will drive you fucking nuts. It'll push you like way over to the other side of the neurotic spectrum. It sucks, and I don't want that for you. So soul searching, do some soul searching. How much is this important? And if it is important, and if you think it is a real thing that is an intrinsic part of you, like even if you just like suspect it, you don't have to know for sure. You're never going to know for sure. But even if you just think that it very well might be, then you got to consider this is not something that is going to be a happy thing to hide for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds kind of like your wife is open to you changing if you were married as Christians and you've deconverted, assuming that you're out to her as an atheist. It might be just a similar conversation. So
could be lucky.
Yeah.
She might be like, well, I'll buy a strap-on. And
she might be, yes.
I've been waiting.
This might be the moment
I've been waiting. I've been wanting to get into the swinger community, honey. And I don't know, who knows?
Suddenly there are a list of guys for you guys to have threesomes with.
Right. I've been preparing this list for the past year.
Why is it laminated?
Oh, God.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
All right. Well, with that, we want to thank y'all for joining us this holiday week. We hope that you are enjoying the family, enjoying the awkward conversations around the table. And
have you put this on in the middle of your house, very loud?
To say, like, while you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner, I hope you're listening to us loud and proud. And please call us and tell us about all of the best fights. We'd love to, again, read more of your emails, hear more of your voicemails. That number again is going to be 512-666-0ASK. We would love to continue to hear from you. We hope you have just the very best of holidays, and that if you find yourself this week or in the next coming month alone or lonely, wanting to have a little bit more community, feeling maybe alienated from family, or just looking for a Thanksgiving feast or some other opportunity, join us here at the ACA. Yeah. Get on the Facebook. Check out our Discord. We have events going on during the holidays. We are going to have community and places for people to gather, and so we hope that you'll be a part of that and let us be part of your family this holiday. And with that, we hope that whether you're stuck at the gym or with family, that you're able to find a quiet place to give yourself a big ol' orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.